Hi, my name is Chris Avila, and welcome to Change 101. Over the next 13 minutes, I'll share some stories about public service and strategies for how to make change. I grew up in Wilmington, Delaware, and I'm currently a senior at Williams College, studying chemistry and political economy. I've worked on the Biden campaign and interned in the U.S. Senate, and I plan on spending the next decade of my life minimizing the disastrous impacts of climate change. To be specific, I'm not trying to save the planet. This speck of dust floating on a sunbeam will be here long after humans are. But the hope that an ever-increasing proportion of humans can enjoy lives of prosperity, security, and happiness might not be alive much longer. Climate change is already the biggest injustice in human history, and we're only making it worse. It's such a big problem because it is upstream of all other problems. Healthcare, hunger, immigration, national security, those all will be much worse if we continue on our current course of emissions. Unfortunately, there are powerful people and institutions invested in the way that the world is, however inhumane. I'm still in college, but I've been in the fight for climate action for over a year now. Doing this work, I have begun to learn how to do politics. I'm still learning more every day, but I believe that I have an answer to an important question that some of you might be asking yourselves. How do I make change? Before taking on that big question, I want to take a step back to before when I had these stories and strategies that I want to share with you today. Because before you make change, you need to find your values. What interests you? What makes you want to take a risk? What would you make sacrifices for? These are tough questions to answer, especially by yourself. I started to answer some of these questions in high school by finding role models. I wanted to be a curious person like my mom. I wanted to be a caring person like my dad. I strived to be a committed runner and student like my friends on the cross-country team, and I cared deeply about the city that I grew up in. Its struggles and stories became a part of my own story, like the public servants who I met doing community service projects. I didn't learn about climate justice until college, but when I did, I knew that it fit my values. I had to be curious about the science, policy, sociology, and so much more to understand such a complex issue. I had to be caring, to not turn a blind eye to truly unimaginable, heartbreaking suffering. And I have to be caring to myself, to not burn out as well. I had to be committed enough to put my own skin in the game. I knew that I wanted to serve others, the way that I had on a small scale back home, on as big a scale as I could. And I found it helpful to maintain close ties to my hometown and build a sense of place and community wherever I go. To understand how big problems affect real people in the most human ways. It takes time to find your values, even if the ones you settle on are from your family, friends, teachers, and coaches, like me. But that time, those experiences are crucial as a foundation from which to make change. Now that we've discussed values, it's time to think about how to make change. To begin answering this question, think of a window, like in a building. If something passes through the window, then that's change. If it's a big object, that's big change. By an object, I mean a public policy, some specific, legally binding promise for future action from a government actor. In a legislature, this is a bill becoming a law. In an executive, this is an agency rule being finalized. In a court, this is a judge adopting legal arguments and deciding in a party's favor. What these objects are not is nebulous things like awareness, conversations, or educating yourself. Getting back to the metaphor of the window, if you want to make change, throw things at the window. But it's not quite that simple. There are a lot of smaller questions that you need to answer at the same time. Are you throwing at the right window? Is the object big enough to even matter? Could you damage the window? And most importantly, is the window even open? Because when it is, there is no excuse for inaction, for letting an opportunity for necessary change pass you by. That's what this talk is about, finding open windows and throwing big things at them. Does that sound too simple? Does it have you thinking, how am I not already doing that? If so, focus on two words: open and big. To think about openness, consider the mechanism of change. Once again, we're not talking about raising awareness. We're talking about policymaking. Is there a vote on a bill coming up? A public comment period on a local ordinance or an EPA rule? An opportunity to make a deposition for a court case? A chance to elect a new government official? These are all examples of policy windows open for change. To think about bigness, consider the object in proportion to your own power and privilege. What capital do you have access to? Financial, social, political? How much skin are you willing to put in the fight? How much are you willing to risk to make this change happen? If these questions are uncomfortable, that's a good thing. You're thinking about this the right way. Making change isn't easy. If you aren't asking these hard, strategic questions, you're likely doing well-intentioned but ineffective activism. The most visible and common example of this for the Gen Z kids out there are infographics on Instagram stories. For the boomers out there, think of the yard sign wars. These are a politics of aesthetics, not a politics of change. To make all this talk of throwing objects at windows a bit more concrete, I want to tell you two stories from the past year about trying to make change. In both stories, I helped throw big objects. In the first story, the window is barely open. In the second story, the window is wide open. Last summer, I interned for U.S. Senator Chris Coons. It was the summer of COVID, so I did this work from my mom's couch, sitting next to my dog and my brother napping on most days. Senator Coons is a Democrat from Wilmington, Delaware, which is also my hometown. He was elected to the Senate in 2010 to replace Joe Biden, who had recently become vice president. Coons and his team have reputations as bipartisan deal makers, deep thinkers, and consummate public servants. Needless to say, I had a lot of respect for the team I was working for. Specifically, I was working on the Energy and Environment Policy Group, also known as Team Earth. Our group of 5 had 3 PhDs and a lot of big ideas. We wanted to put a price on carbon dioxide emissions. We wanted to invest in technologies to capture carbon from the atmosphere and other technologies to make steel and other industrial materials with far less byproduct pollution. And we wanted to make sure marginalized people were not treated unjustly by the big changes that we proposed. So yeah, those were the big things we wanted to throw out the window. And our team could heave if only the window were open. In the end, our work led to the bipartisan passage of the $35 billion Energy Act of 2020, which provided the largest investment in federal renewable energy since 2007. That bill included funding new technologies for carbon-free energy, making developed technologies more affordable for low-income communities, and banning a particularly harmful greenhouse gas. Not bad in the end. We got something through the window, but not nearly as big of a thing as we were trying to get. We spent $35 billion when we think it'll take at least $3 trillion to adequately address climate change. That's 100 times more money. At the end of the day, there was only so much that we could accomplish with Mitch McConnell in charge of the Senate and Donald Trump in the White House. In the end, we succeeded in opening the window just enough for some change to happen, but it wasn't enough. That's a very natural segue to my second story. In our system of government, the window to make change opens with regularity in beautiful, albeit imperfect things called elections. One of the many ways that elections are great is that the opening of the window is done for you. It is mandated by law and carried out by agents of the state. That being said, we need to remain ever vigilant about infringements on voting rights, many happening right now in state legislatures. Notice how in the first story, we had to be opening the window and throwing something through it at the same time. Can you imagine what that would look like literally? It would be really awkward. While working in the Senate, I was frustrated by how little we could get done with Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump in charge. So I was always thinking about ways that I could do more. This was, of course, the summer of COVID-19, and there was a lot of uncertainty about what my senior year at Williams would look like. So I took this uncertainty as an opportunity to do something not in my original plan: work on the Biden campaign. With the injustices of unmitigated climate change looming large in my mind, I felt that it would be irresponsible to return to being a college kid focused on papers and parties. when the window for change was wide open. I ended up getting a job for the North Carolina Democrats in Asheville as a field organizer, which is pretty much a cross between a salesperson and a day laborer. I was working 10 to 12-hour days on Zoom, training volunteers, and spending the rest of my time calling every Democrat in town, persuading them to start volunteering too. I had to be personable, but also purposeful, effervescent, but also efficient, and I had to do that day after day. As a brief aside, I was very grateful to be a member of such an effective union. By the final weeks of the campaign, one other organizer and I were managing a team of over 200 volunteers across Zoom phone banks and social distance door knocking. We called our volunteers the Civic Superstars, and they really were superstars, logging over 1,000 volunteer hours in the final 4 days of the campaign alone. And then, after a lot of painful waiting that I would rather not remember, it became clear that we had won. Our team had elected a new president of the United States. We'd gotten something huge through the window by joining the movement, each doing our own part, and bringing our family and friends along too. But this isn't a talk about my life. This is a talk about making change. So I want to underscore something here, especially to the high schoolers watching. I'm not special. Just 1 year ago, I had not worked in the Senate, nor on a winning presidential campaign. I was often frustrated by how hard it was to accomplish the simplest of policy change on my campus and in my hometown, let alone in my country. Just 4 years ago, I was in high school. Back then, I truly had no clue about how to make change or even the change that I wanted to help make. But I did know that I wanted to serve others. The skills that you need to serve others and make change are acquired through practice. And I encourage you to try this simple playbook to get started. First, find your values. What interests you? What makes you want to take a risk? What would you make sacrifices for? Answering these questions takes time, so find some role models and do some reflecting. Next, find an issue. For me, that's climate justice. For you, that could be anything. It should be something that is urgent and based in your values. Find open windows. Remember, you're not trying to raise awareness with infographics and yard signs. You're trying to make policy by influencing the decisions that governments and businesses make. Join up with organizations doing the work. Finding an issue and open windows can be challenging, and it can be lonely and dispiriting to work alone. Find a community of people in an organization who share your values and objectives. Do your part within the organization, however small it may seem. A good organization is more than the sum of its parts, so know your role and do it well. Bring others with you. Get good at telling the story of why you're doing the work that you're doing, often to your friends, listening to what they say, and persuading them to join you. Learn from everything you do. I do a lot of personal writing, especially low-pressure journaling when I'm running into problems. Similarly, I try to stay humble, read a lot, and listen keenly. Repeat. You're not a one-trick pony. Incorporate what you learn and try new issues, new windows, new organizations, and new roles. You're more capable than you realize. From climate change to voting rights, our country and our world need effective change makers who genuinely care about serving others. If you're watching this talk and think that might be you, start small and start now. Let this playbook be a guide, and I can't wait to hear what change you have made in 4 years' time.